Hi, I'm Gary and welcome to our Outdoors channel. So this video is about RC vehicles and covers the Lane Boys RC light wiring kit for wiring up lighting in RC cars and trucks for realism. You get headlights, tail lights, turn signals, brake lights, backup lights, four-way flashers, and more. So this is an in-depth look at this modification to RC vehicles. This is not a DIY kit that is just plug and play. It's not real difficult, but it requires learning some techniques such as testing and soldering electrical parts. Now if you have done any work with your RC vehicle such as batteries, you can probably handle this. In this you will learn not only putting this together, but also techniques on how to do repairs, and you will learn to salvage wire and parts from RCs and other sources. And that's for reuse and repairs. This is a series of videos in 3 parts. Part 1 is wiring and soldering. Part 2 is mounting and testing the lights in the body. Part 3 is adding the light board and programming it at your computer. So this video is part 2 about mounting and testing the lights in the body. Be sure to give us a like and hit that thumbs up icon, and share it with your family, friends, and fellow RC enthusiasts. Please comment and tell us your ideas. So let's get started with this one now.
Got all the jumpers or extensions or whatever you want to call them all soldered up, all shrink wrapped in. Like I said, the 3 that are going to be in the receiver box, I only do the 1 shrink wrap. You could put a second one over it, but I think it's too stiff and can't bend. The reason you want them to bend, I pulled out an old receiver just to show you. This would be in your receiver box. Channel 1 is steering, channel 2 is your throttle control. Channel 3, if you have it, can be hooked up into the board to control the lights. In my case, for this body, I'm going to have a switch on the body, so I don't need channel 3 in the setup I'm doing. But you would need 1 more of these jumpers if you did. And then from there you can use servo extensions. I didn't have any, so I chose to make one using the same method. So I've got a female on one end and a male on the other. So how this actually hooks up in the receiver. So we're going to take channel 1 and make sure you get your polarities right on this one. The ground is on the right side, so we'll plug in the jumper to there. Channel 2 is going to be the throttle, so we'll put this one that's a little longer into the throttle side. If we had channel 3, we would use that. So then we take the end of the throttle on the board. There's a TH symbol. That's your throttle 1. You can plug it into either one of those, but make sure your polarity is right. I've got it set so negative is on the right again. So we'll put that in there. And then for the throttle, or for the steering, once again we'll make sure our ground is on the other side. So this would sit in your receiver box like this. Now your steering servo would connect right here on the other black bar for the steering section, and your throttle or your ESC would go on to the other blue one there. Auxiliary, just straight up, it only needs 1 plug. It's not going out to another unit, so, or anything like that. Now the last one says light, and that's the one going out to the light board. So we would have, I would take my 3rd one, make sure we get ground on the right side. That would go into there. This, I plan on using a servo extension just so I can plug it in and out of the truck easier without having to go either into the servo or into the receiver box or trying to pull it from the body on a short cable. I wanted to do it on an extension cable. Match up our negative to negative. In this case, the darker brown is the negative. That'll plug into there. This will feed out to the actual light controller, which is here, and it has the 6-pin connector here. And you can see where it says negative, positive, steering RX, and throttle RX. So basically, we have our darker brown is our negative, so we want that on the negative one. It'll plug into there. So from there, it's this brain is sending all the signals to this wire. It interprets what's going on, that you're controlling, throttle, steering, and whatnot, and it will shoot out to these connectors and tell the lights what to do. Also, when it comes time to program, you always unplug here, and it includes a ribbon cable with a custom cross in it. This one says USB to serial, and this side says controller. So this is the controller side, and if you'll notice, it has the negative, the positive, steering RX, THRX for throttle, gap for channel 3, and ISP out. So that connects into there for programming. And then on the programming card, you'll see that the labels match up there too. So you got 2 grounds, VVC, which I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure exactly what the meanings are, but they match up. So that would plug in like that. Then use a standard micro USB to plug into there and into the computer. Use his programming software. You can program what each one of these little 16 channels are going to do. As you can see, they're labeled 0 all the way through to 16. Or actually, this one's labeled to 15S. So you got that many connections you can make. So, and then we have the 2 positive LEDs that I was telling you about. And so basically, these 2 are where we're going to have pull our positive from and run that to all the lights. The grounds will come back. I have noticed on previous ones, 0 is always on, so I haven't been using 0. So I start at 1 and work my way through. And you will notice that number 4 is not actually labeled, but it is this corner one. And when I'm doing this, just because this is such a small solder connection point, I skip every other. So I've only been using the odd ports. So I've been using 1, 3, 5, 7, going around an odd, just to give myself a little bit more room for soldering. If you got better soldering skills than I do, you could probably get away with using them all and have them all controlled. Alrighty, I'm going to do an example of how to wire in a light. So this one I already know. This is the grill. So we're going to take just the light bucket out of it. We'll set the rest of the grill aside for now. So this one we already know. Positive is red and negative is the black one. This one's kind of falling apart, as you can see, but at least we know which wire is what. We're going to pull off all of this old shrink tubing and insulation, just because I already know that that's the positive. I'm going to leave that there for right now. And this guy does fit perfectly into that light bucket. And we'll glue these in the long run. And actually, I think I'm going to put it in there like that, just so I have a sturdy base to solder with. I think the headlights, I am going to use blue wire. So I'm going to take some of my wire that I pulled out, and I got blue and white here. I'm going to separate them like so. We'll give them a quick strip with the strippers. Let's see if we can get them both at once. There we go. So I think I am going to use the whites as my positive and the blue as my grounds. That way the solid colors are going to come up as the grounds and easier to identify on the bigger board where the groundings go. So if those are going to be my grounds, I'm wanting to solder this solid color to the one that's missing right now because we know it's the ground. But while that soldering iron is heating up, we're going to cut a couple of small chunks of shrink tubing. So now we got 2 of those. We will slide those up, and especially on a rock crawler like I'm doing, it's nice to have the shrink tubing on the LEDs because it will keep it more watertight and less likely to fail if you're going through any kind of water hazard. And you can actually use this method of soldering to the LEDs itself for just doing a quick on and off, or like this thing was wired, just all the lights are constant on. Just make sure your LEDs are rated for 12 volt if you're going to do that. Otherwise, a standard LED is rated for 6 volts. And a lot of them leave them burn out, or cheaper ones will leave them burn out at 5 volts. So you want to watch, or you can get a voltage controller to light the LEDs and keep the voltage in the correct level. So, looks like we are warm on the soldering iron. Oop, not quite warm enough to sizzle, but not enough to melt the solder. And we might use the helping hands. Oh, I could show you another little trick. If you don't happen to have one of these helping hand guys, or don't want to pick one up, odd little trick I learned is you could take a pair of pliers, pin one side of the pliers underneath the wire, have the wire bent up a little bit, and have the other end up like that. And that way it holds it up in the air and fairly still. Now I lost a chunk of shrink tubing. We'll put that back on. This might actually make it easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. Let's see, we should have enough heat now to do some soldering. Yes. So we'll add some solder. And solid copper tins pretty much the same way as regular braided wire or stranded wire. So let's see, bend the white out of the way since we're going to use that as the positive. And we will just tack on to the LED line. And as usual, I always end up with that little bump on them. You can just squeeze those out with the pliers. Bring our shrink tubing down and get it as close to the lamp as you possibly can. Just helps with water. Alrighty, and I'm just going to leave that on there for now, not shrink it yet, because we need to disconnect the white or the other side of this. And I think we will just take a hobby knife and gently cut away the shrink tubing on here. Hopefully. And I will show you hopefully at least one connection with a brand new LED. I like to recycle. I like used stuff just because it saves money and it seems more fun to me. So, here's something that's interesting. The guy who built this was smart enough to put a resistor in here. This restricts the voltage and keeps it from the high voltage of the 3-cell battery from burning out the LED. We're not going to need it in this case. The electronic board's going to take care of all that. But I think we'll desolder it back here and hang on to this resistor. Just so, hey, if we do some other lighting, we have it. So, we will, to desolder, it's kind of the opposite of soldering, except you're doing a little pulling. So I will touch onto the solder connection and put tension between the wire and the housing. And it comes right apart. You can use a desoldering tool or a solder wick also. But yeah, for most of this, I haven't had an issue. Now we'll get this guy lined up and solder on our positive side. Well, I hope if I can get it to finagle just the way I want it. There we go. Soldered up nice, and it's solid cooled. And that one slid right nice. And we'll shrink the tubing. Always do at least 2 sides, and don't burn yourself with the lighter. So now we have a solid connection. For standard LEDs, if you have a 1-cell LiPo, you can easily power it up and check each connection as you go. Make sure each one lights up. Get a little copper showing here. And I happen to have a 3-cell LiPo that I've been using for testing, but I don't hook it to this connection. I use the balance connector. So on the balance connector, you can see there's a red, 2 blues, and a black. You only want to use 2 of the wires. The red is your positive, black is your negative, and the way these go through is, so the top one would be a positive, second one would be the negative for that cell. It's also the positive for the second cell, and that would be the negative for the second cell. Also is the positive for the third cell, and that's the negative for the third cell. And you can pull like a 2 or 3S currents, depending on how many you skip. But we just want 1 cell, and we want the headlight to hopefully light up. So we got our white is positive. I'm going to flip this around like that, and I'm just going to touch on these little connectors, and boom, we got a working headlight. That simple. We know we got a good solid connection. And I'm going to repeat this on the small turn signal one. I could reuse these wires, but I'd rather have these stiffer ones so I can tuck them in the body better. So I'm going to repeat that process. So soldering onto a new LED, since the old one you can actually see that's the positive side, that's the negative side. Whenever you're working with brand new LEDs, the longer side will always be your positive side. So I've got a couple of wires tinned up. So since I always leave my leads long, I bend them apart a little bit, give myself some working room, and I push this guy all the way down to the LED at the end of the wire. Since we're doing positive here, got the long side of the LED and the white wire. Touch it for a quick moment. And, oh, she didn't quite take. Some LEDs come pre-tinned, some don't. And I'm guessing these ones are not tinned. So, what we'll do, get a little solder on them. Just a little bit is all it takes. And move our heat shrink back up. And we'll get our positive out. Touch it on there. Touch our soldering iron. Wait for it to melt and come back. Oops, go. There we go. Melted, coming back. And there, it's connected good. And now we can do the same on the negative side. Just set down my solder. There we go. So we're going to tin the negative side now. Oop. Like I said, very little solder needed on that. And again, we're going to touch the wire all the way up to the bottom of the LED, just because we want it as short as possible. Quick touch. Oop, I missed. We'll try that again. And a lot of times soldering takes more than one try. And there we go. Now we will want to trim off that's a cold solder joint. See how easy that came off. That means I didn't heat up the whole works for long enough. And a cold solder joint, just everything's not all joined together. And for some reason I'm having a little trouble with this one. A little patience. And we'll try that again. And there we go. Now we got a good solid connection. So now I will take my side cutters and I will cut these down as far as I can. Hopefully you can see this without cutting the wire, but we want to cut the excess lead off of the LED. And there we go. So we got a nice connection. We'll slide our shrink tubing up. Oop, we may have to squeeze down some of these solder blobs just so the shrink wrap comes over it. And I'm sure the guys who could solder really good don't even get those blobs, but yeah, this is basic soldering. So we're all pushed up. Lighter for the heat shrink. And we should be good. Then we'll test the connection. Like I said, I test it with a single cell of a LiPo. If you have one cell LiPo, you can just use that. I use the balance connectors off of a 2 or a 3 cell. That way I could just pull voltage off of part of it. So our white is our positive, so we're going to have that on the red, and then the blue, the solid color is the negative. So if we slide those into the connector, get them lined up, we should have a light on. Wondering why my LEDs aren't lighting up. Alrighty, anyway, on to soldering onto a pad. So on all my wiring, I'm going to use the white wires and the wire combination. They're all going to be positive. So at that point, it doesn't matter which white stripe wire I'm using, as long as I have a white stripe wire. So I'm going to pull, I think, some green out. And I'm going to strip off just the green and white stripe off of that. Alrighty, I got a section of wire pulled out. I'm going to go ahead and strip that real quick. Oop, that's a bit long. If you do strip it a bit long, you can just take a nippers and take it down. And what I aim for is the insulation to be just slightly shorter than the pad. If you can't quite see, sometimes angles are bad. I want that just slightly shorter than the pad. Right there, it's slightly longer. So I'm going to trim that down a little bit more yet. And there we go. Now we're slightly shorter than the pad. I'm going to hold this board into position with a helping hand. A lot of times I will actually use the magnifying glass on this in order to see better, but I'm going to try and do it without, so you guys can see it on camera. So basically we want to tin the wire on this. So I'm going to use that guy. Oop. We'll just feed it through here real quick. As long as we can hold the wire still, we can tin it. And make sure you don't drip onto your circuit board, obviously. Get some solder going. Generally, most circuit boards will be tinned when you get them, so you don't have to tin the board unless you remove solder from it. And what the heck? I had a weird chunk of wire in there. Now that guy's all long again. Let's trim that down again. Slightly too long. And that should be good. Let's see if we can get a little bit better angle. So I can see our stripped areas right there. And we'll retin this thing again. Okay, we'll use the pliers this time to hold it still. However, you can get it to hold still, so you can hold your solder in one hand and your iron in the other. A little bit on there. And just barely touch it. And let off. And she didn't hold. I might not have to clean that guy real quick. Try doing a hot scrape. Alrighty, I'm going to switch over to a different soldering iron. I think the tip is just real bad when you use metal. Propane burns-o-matic unit works really good, especially out in the field. We'll get this lit. It's going to have a bit of hissing going on in the background due to this. These guys are actually really nice to use. I set her for number 3 on the output setting, or the flow setting. Open that guy up and hit the switch. Give it a light. You'll hear flaming up. Something I watch for is a little bit of red glowing inside the tip there. That's when you know you can just let her closed. This guy, it'll heat up in this little hole. It'll start turning red shortly before it's ready to be actually used as a solder. This one also does have a much smaller tip than my plug-in desktop one. So this ought to do the job a little bit better for using those small little tabs. And it should be getting close to being able to solder. It's getting there. And I'll clean up this tip a little bit before we actually solder too. So cleaning it is actually quite simple. Any kind of flux paste, it'll kind of sizzle and melt in there. And then wipe it off on a wet sponge. And then you retin. And we can see that inner piece up here is getting quite red. There we go, now we see her. Actually, you can tell the heat's transferring much better on this just because it's a smoother look where the solder is melted. So we'll hold that guy on our pad, touch our soldering iron for a few moments, pull our heat away, and I'm wondering if he did not actually solder up the pads on this one. Oh, there it goes. Although there's not much there. Does seem to have connected well. Give her a couple pulls. So that's essentially how you solder up that. And I'm going to see if I can add just a little bit of solder to the joint, just for more rigidity. There we go. I like the look of that better. The way it was probably would have been just fine, but you know, you can see I got a solder ball on the end of it. Just gives more grip. So now we have a wire to run out to our different lights. So let me get a corner set up. Since I showed you how to solder the LEDs, I could just kind of show you the setup from there, and you just keep soldering along. Alrighty, a little bit of a update. Got a little farther on this whole light wire harness. So since I did show you how to get the LEDs to that point where they're soldered on with leads, got this one set up so all the white wire is the positive, all the colored wires are the negatives. Basically, you can see all these white wires meet in the middle here, just a soldered connection between them all. That carries the positive to all three of these lights. The grounds all come off and come around to the other side here. You'll notice that the blue wire that is the ground on this side is also the ground on this side, and once again all the power runs to all these LEDs. So, and each of these two have their own ground wire also, so I can decide which way to program them. Got that all tied together and just keeping everything tidy with some shrink tubing, so I got plenty of wire to get back to the light controller. Next I'll show you how these will go on to the light controller. Alright, just a quick look, doing a light test to make sure everything is working. Just got it plugged straight into a battery to check it, and we can see the side markers, headlights, which are quite bright. The markers underneath the headlights are all working. Let's see if I can. And now side markers, so the front's all working. So without the light controller itself, but at least we know all the bulbs are working before we go any further. Alrighty, just an odd little thing I figured I'd go across. I think I'm going to mount this controller right underneath the passenger side door handle here, on the inside of the body, obviously. One nice way to set this up is, since we know what wires are what and what channel we're going to go to what, so it's positive. I'm going to fish that out of the whole scheme, and we will want to have that probably come straight down like that. So, and being this a solid core wire, you can actually get it to bend at right angles and have it start sitting. Hopefully you can see that right over that positive LED. Get around the shadow, so I'll have that come straight down like that, and each one of them I will have run down to their appropriate channel. That way they all stay organized and in a good spot.
Okay, so this is the end of part 2, mounting and testing the lights on the body. If you want to practice your soldering skills, you can get hold of an old radio or other electronic components from trash or a garage sale. It doesn't matter really what it is, as long as you can just tear it apart and practice your soldering. That's a cheap and easy way to practice. The next will be part 3, adding the light board and programming it at your computer. We will be publishing part 3 in the upcoming weeks, so stay tuned. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got some inspiration about adding some lights to your RC vehicle. If you did, please give us a like and hit that thumbs up icon. Please share with your family, friends, and fellow RC enthusiasts. Please give us your comments on what you would like to see, any questions you may have, and what ideas you can share with us. And please subscribe and be sure to hit that bell icon so you don't miss anything new. Thank you.